Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Today I want to talk about one of the best role-playing games that's ever, in my opinion, to have been made. The Marvel Superheroes Heroic Role-Playing Game, a product of good old TSR. Now this is the basic version, and as a kid I had the advanced. Because as a kid, I still thought advanced meant better. And now I'm an adult. And I know that that's not always the case. So I recently bought this. Well, I say recently, 3 years ago. Got this on eBay. It's in relatively good shape. The contents were pretty much complete. And there are actually some little bonuses to be found in it. And the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game actually kind of plays a big role in my geeky life because it's how I ultimately got into reading comic books. So what do we got here on the cover? We got, of course, Spider-Man, Captain America, The Thing, Captain Marvel, who was a relatively new character at the time that I think they wanted to get out there. So how did I get into this thing? Game came out in '84. I was already playing role-playing games, obviously, by then. I started a few years before that. I played Dungeons & Dragons. I had Gamma World. I played some of that. I had never played Marvel Superheroes, and I wasn't really all that into Marvel Superheroes. I didn't read the comic books. My knowledge of the characters primarily came from television, and I mean that's true of the DC characters as well. I knew these characters from Super Friends, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, The Electric Company. Honestly, I think the first exposure I ever had to Spider-Man was on The Electric Company. When I first saw a Spider-Man cartoon and he actually talked, I was surprised. I thought that communicating in thought bubbles is like all Spider-Man did. I thought he was a silent character. So I didn't know anything about these. So there happened to be a kid at junior high who I became acquainted with, who found out that I played role-playing games and that I ran role-playing games. And he had Marvel Superheroes, and he had a particular module for Marvel Superheroes, and wanted to play it. He was looking for somebody to run the game for him. And I said, well, I really don't know anything about the comic books. But, I mean, I'd be willing, I guess. So one day I go over to his house, which was right by the school. And it was a rental. He ultimately was only at the school for maybe, I don't know, a few weeks. So I guess, his mom and him moved around a bit. We made a little bit of a trade. He got my Dungeons and Dragons battle system game, not permanently, or at least that wasn't the idea. And I got to borrow this bit from Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. He said, look this over. You can kind of get an idea of some of the characters in it. And so I looked it over, and I was very intrigued by some of these characters. Again, there were a few that I recognized, but I was like, there's a She-Hulk? Spider-Woman? Wow, who's this punk, Storm character? Yeah, so it really intrigued me, and like I said, ultimately, he disappears from school and disappeared with my battle system game, which in a way was okay. I never really played it, and I ended up with just this insert, and this is not the actual insert, this is one I bought later, of these characters. And so one day I'm at a 7-Eleven with my dad, and there's the comic books on the rack, as God intended them to be. And so, Dad, can I get a comic? Yeah, sure, that's fine. And I picked this up. Now, this is the actual comic. This is really the first superhero comic I ever bought that started me collecting them. And I picked it up because it has a bunch of people on it. And I figure, well, I mean, that's got to be pretty good. That was like everybody. I could figure out who all these people are. Again, I mean, I probably recognize some from that insert in Secret Wars, but other than the Hulk, who I knew from TV, although not quite in that form, and probably Captain America, who got marketed a lot, I didn't know who any of these people were. And yeah, this was my first introduction to all this stuff, really, and I was pretty hooked. Having these guys in here is probably a reason why I got West Coast Avengers early on, and the Avengers. Anyways, I won't go into all that, but Marvel Superheroes Role Playing got me into collecting Marvel Comics. And so eventually, like I said, I got the advanced game. Now this is the basic game. And I loved it. I think this is one of the best games that's ever been made. Let's take a look at the contents. Look at that action shot. So we got this battle book, which sort of kind of puts you through the paces on how the game works. The intro to role-playing sort of thing. What is a hero? Of course, we're focusing on Spider-Man, Marvel's ambassador to the world. But we got some other guys up there. There's the X-Men. And talks about the different abilities and how they work. It talks about feats, not the same as 3rd edition D&D feats, but how to do things with the abilities you have. Of course, a lot of people will refer to this system as phase rip, for fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche, the different ability scores you can have. We have karma. We have moving on the map, showing different kinds of strength. So one of the innovations here, and in some ways it reminds me of the old level titles from D&D, but it's these ratings for the different abilities. Feeble, poor, typical good, excellent, remarkable, incredible, amazing, monstrous, unearthly, and class 1000. And yeah, I actually haven't played this game in years, and I can actually remember, I know the order, I can recite it. This shows material strength, like amazing is the strength of steel alloys and granite. Class 1000 would be stuff like adamantium and the Captain America shield, Thor's hammer, things like that. The layout here is really good. They make good use of the Marvel Comics and the illustrations. It's very simple to understand. You could learn the game relatively quickly. I think they understood that they were going to be pulling a lot of kids in on this one and wanted to make sure it was very understandable. They give you an example of a fight between Spider-Man and Captain America. And so they basically give you all the basics you need to understand the game in this book. And one of the things that I love about this is that it's a really good marriage of mechanics and subject matter. The game is set up in such a way to really recreate Marvel comic book adventures. And I mean specifically the Marvel style. Because we all know, at least back in them olden days, that Marvel comics and DC comics were different. They felt different. They worked a little differently. And this gives you the Marvel feel. The mighty Marvel manner. More so than the DC feel. And we will, at some point, be looking at Mayfair's DC Heroes game, which actually does a pretty darn good job of recreating DC adventures, although the rules are not, in my opinion, quite as easygoing as these. And so one of the big things in this game is this little thing right here, the universal table. Now, they would reuse this in their Conan role-playing game, and I think the Indiana Jones role-playing game. The game works entirely with percentile dice. There's your dice roll. And so you have either, this could refer to the ability scores. It could refer to what you're trying to do, who you're going up against. You'd roll your dice. You'd look at the column. You go down, and you're going to get a green, yellow, or red effect. And the battle effects table down here gives you an idea of what that means. So if you're using your fighting ability to attack somebody, there are two ways to do it. One is slugfest, meaning you're punching. One is hack and slash. Wolverine would be using hack and slash. The Thing would be using slugfest generally, although could change. And so if you get the white, if your roll gets you in the white column, you miss. The green is a hit. Yellow is a slam. Red is a stun. So different effects. Agility, shooting and throwing or dodging. Strength, grappling, escaping, snatching. Endurance, charging, slam, stun, meaning are you actually slammed? Are you actually stunned? In fact you are, but how badly? I guess I'm sorry, I take that back. You can be non-slammed or non-stunned. Anyways, it's a really nice, simple way. It's one table that you need to have handy that runs everything. Unlike, for example, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, where there's a fair number of tables you got to look at to run the game back then. This makes it all really nice and easy. Again, I think they were going for a younger audience, potentially. That universal table and phase rip, they've lived on. People have done clones. I think it's one of the best systems ever come up with for a role-playing game. And specifically for this kind of role-playing game. I don't think, you could use this for, like, Dungeons & Dragons, but I don't know if it would work as well. Now, if you were trying to duplicate a fantasy movie, this might actually work really, really well. So we also have the campaign book. And this goes a little more in depth. This is sort of your Dungeon Master's Guide. It gets into the different powers and how they work. It gets into different things like a sentry robot, teleporters. Oh, there's Iron Man with his rolling skates, Ghost Rider, etc. It gets into, it gets heavier into the actual rules. You got magic. The magic system in this is very, very simple, but it's very fluid. The advanced game really kind of categorizes everything a bit more. But I rather like the way they do it in this. I think it's a little more intuitive. I've run some superhero games. You got to go a little bit loosey-goosey on them. Because you're trying to duplicate what you would see in illustration and comics. And you can't be too you got to interpret things a little bit and what people are trying to do. Because as we know, the guys writing the books, they're not using some kind of complex system to do it. They're, to some degree, making things up as they go along, as long as it stays within the vague bounds of what a character can do. And I kind of like that in here. And we get some stats for animals and great art from, the history of Marvel Comics. Oh, look at that Dazzler. There's where Dazzler went into a very 80s look. And we got some ads on the back there. Star Frontiers, which I also got back in the day. And then what else do we get in this game? We get these character cards. Oops, I got some old paper in there. that the original owner of this was working with. And so you got the stats on the back of the cards. And the images, you got some John Byrne in there. I love that Thing image. I'd love to get that on a t-shirt. It comes with an adventure, Day of the Octopus. Obviously focusing on Dr. Octopus. But we get some stats back here for Beetle, Fixer, the Octodroid robot, Radioactive Man, Scorpion are in there. And this lays out how you would run an adventure. It's a fairly simple one. Involves some basic fights and has Captain Marvel, Captain America, Thing, and Spider-Man as the characters. And then we get the map. So this was one that was designed, well, sort of for miniatures. I think they did make some. But primarily it used these little counters. Clutter, for example. Let's find a more interesting one. Spider-Man. And there's Peter Parker on the other side. Don't know if we can get a real good zoom on that one. Not that crisp and clear. But anyway, so we have several characters and villains in here. And for the advanced game, they did ones that you could sort of fold into a kind of a, what do they call it? A triangular cylinder with the characters so they'd stand up. But you got this map. I don't know how far out I can unfold this thing given the space requirement or space limitations. But you can see it kind of represents a city, obviously New York, where everything always happens in Marvel. Although the idea is you could use this for multiple games. You just kind of pick and choose where you're doing things. And so for combat, the characters could use the little counters on the actual thing and, you know, duplicate what they're doing. And I think other modules had other maps included. Oh, and there we got also old school percentile dice. I rolled a 31 over 13. So it's a very slim system. It's very easily learned. And it really did a great job of bringing to life Marvel-style comic book adventures. They came out with numerous modules at TSR. I had a few back in the day. This is one of the things that I kind of got rid of over time, just because of space and etc. But they did have a lot of modules, and you can still find them out there. You could easily come up with your own. In the advanced game, you get rules for designing your own characters. So it does have that going for it. This game is more or less, hey, work with what you got. But so the advanced game, you get that. Now you could find, you know, like I said, clones, and you could find this stuff out there in downloadable formats if you're really interested and want to take a look. But it's a really fun game. It's one of those games, you know, we all owned a lot of games back in the day, but we didn't necessarily play all of them. I played a lot of D&D, and I played a fair amount of Gamma World. Gave Star Frontiers a try or two, but Marvel Superheroes I played quite a lot of with people because it was such an easy game to pick up, and it was so much fun. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that in Dragon Magazine, TSR also gave us, in the back section, Talislanta Miniatures, nice. They gave us a series of articles called The Marvel File. Now this particular one is actually giving you stats to a lot of dead characters. They did a storyline where numerous villains who had really only shown up like maybe once in a comic book, they were kind of the B, C villains, got offed by a character called Scourge of the Underworld. And I want to say I think it showed up in Captain America. It might have showed up in The Thing as well. and they had to figure out who was killing off all these supervillains. And so this one gives you Birdman to Turner D. Century. Just recently read one of his in Spider-Woman. Cheetah, Commander Kraken, Cyclone. Oh, Firebrand. I was just reading an Iron Man with him in it. Just earlier today. Grappler, Hellraiser, etc. And there's Scourge. Oops, I'm not really in frame on that one. There's Scourge. Which is cool if you're setting things in earlier, Marvel Universe. It gives you a lot of stats for these characters that you might want to use. And so you got that pretty much every month in Dragon. They would cover different characters, and it was sort of a way also to update. So I believe one of them had Tony Stark's new Iron Man armor when he returned to being Iron Man, and he had the red and silver, and it kind of gave you the stats for that. So you get characters like that, and it would cover stuff that they weren't covering elsewhere. So TSR did a lot to support the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. Actually, it's they produced a lot of stats for a lot of characters, and if you have the Dragon Magazine archive, you could get a hold of all those, and you could probably find them elsewhere, out on the internet, where lots of stuff resides that probably shouldn't. So that's Marvel Superheroes, the heroic role-playing game from TSR. If you can find a box set out there, you'll pay a few bucks for it. And again, this one is not in the greatest shape. I would not mind maybe getting a better copy at some point in the future. But for now, I'm happy with this. And I actually did open it up, play out a little scenario with my daughter just to give it a shot because it had been so long. Oh, and I got to mention this. So one of the things that I found in this box too was things left by the previous owner, or at least the previous owner when he was maybe, 13 to 16 years old. Now, I'm not going to show some of the stuff because it has his name on it. I don't want to do that. But I am going to show the back of a character sheet for a hero named, and if the person who owned this is out there, I hope you enjoy this. A character named Spasmo Joe. Spasmo Joe was a pretty funky looking guy. Again, I don't want this one actually doesn't have his name on it, but still. So there's Spasmo Joe. I love it when you get vintage stuff that has little things like this sort of tucked away. It just brings you back to when you played it yourself and all the stuff that you invented and created and the fun you had. But yeah, Spasmo Joe, one of the forgotten Marvel superheroes. Well, I think that'll do it for this edition. Marvel Superheroes game, the phase rip system with the universal table. Easily one of the best systems that's ever been invented. Like I said, it was used for other games as well. And you could take that and you could probably adapt it to a whole host of things. I think especially if you're doing sort of cinematic or comic booky kind of action stuff, it works really well. It's a little more loose. It's a little more interpretive, but not overly so. And it's very easy to learn. There's not a lot of rules that the players have to learn. Great for younger players, but also great for modern players with short attention spans. Oh, and I got to mention, too, one of the great mechanics in it that really makes it a comic book game is karma. When you do good things, you earn karma points, and you can spend those karma points to help you when you're fighting or getting out of danger or what have you. So it's sort of built in for why Spider-Man wants to stop and help a kitten out of a tree or stop some random crooks who are, robbing a dime store. Why Spider-Man wants to swing in and throw Hostess pies at him to get him to stop. That's going to build up his karma score, and that's going to help him later when he's fighting Dr. Octopus or the Green Goblin, to maybe, get in that, well, I won't say killing shot, but knocking out shot, or to escape at the last second from the, jaws of death. It's a great mechanic, and it works well. And I think, if I remember correctly, it works in a way, the opposite way for villains, that, by being evil, they increase their ability to attack the heroes. So there we go. Marvel Superheroes, the heroic role-playing game by TSR. I want to say 1984. Take a look at the back for you. Kind of shows you what you're getting. It is a great game, folks. And if you never had it, you might want to get it. Especially for beer and pretzel type role playing. You can pop this thing open, learn it quickly, have a fun little session with the kids or with friends at the table. Maybe, a player can't make it, so you can't run your normal campaign. Break out Marvel Superheroes, let people choose their favorite, and go to town. So that'll do it for Dad's Den of Pop Culture. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and please share with others. I really appreciate that. It helps my channel to grow. We're almost to 100 subscribers. Or hey, maybe by the time this one actually airs, we will have 100 subscribers. But we're getting close, and I appreciate every single person who has subscribed. I thank you. I appreciate everybody who has commented, and if you have comments, maybe memories of this game that you'd like to share, or any questions about it that I could maybe answer, please leave comments. I really enjoy getting them. As long as they're not abusive and you're calling me names, although I can take it. In the meantime, God bless everybody. Try to have some fun out there and be kind to one another, because it's a rough world, and, I kind of work in economics. It might be getting a little bit rougher here in the future. So hang in there, folks, and help each other out, and we'll all get through it. And I will see you again on Dad's Den of Pop Culture.